Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the circumstances and what conclusions to draw from Monday's bombing in Manchester. With us to talk about it is Simon Scofield of the Human Security think tank. He is with us from Bristol. From London, Jonathan Russell, Executive Director of the Quilliam Foundation. Welcome back to the show, and welcome back to Max Abrams of Northeastern University, a fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations Center for Cyber and Homeland Security. Max Abrams with us from Boston, Massachusetts. The attack on Monday has triggered the suspension of campaigning ahead of that June 8th general election in the UK. Earlier, the Prime Minister spoke outside her residence at number 10 Downing Street.
We struggle to comprehend the warped and twisted mind that sees a room packed with young children not as a scene to cherish, but as an opportunity for carnage. But we can continue to resolve to thwart such attacks in future, to take on and defeat the ideology that often fuels this violence, and if there turn out to be others responsible for this attack, to seek them out and bring them to justice.
Interesting there, Jonathan Russell. We heard Theresa May saying we struggle to comprehend this warped and twisted mind that's something that carries out this. It's in stark contrast with the then French Prime Minister Manuel Valls after the Paris attacks, who said starting to understand is starting to forgive, and that he was roundly criticized for that. Should we be trying to get into the minds, trying to figure out exactly what happened?
Absolutely, we should. Starting to understand may not be starting to forgive, as Val said, but starting to understand will help us start to challenge it more effectively. And I, for one, was disappointed that in the manifestos from the three major parties last week, there was barely 30 words on probably the biggest threat that faces our country at the moment. The Labour Party suggested that they would scrap Prevent. The Liberal Democrats suggested that they might rebrand Prevent. The Conservative Party said that they would carry on as normal because they think their strategy is working. Now, I don't think any of that is good enough. It's clear that the threat is rising. It's clear that the security services, who, you know, credit to them, have stopped 13 similar attacks in recent history, are overstretched. And this one, as they had predicted, to be fair to them, slipped through the net. I think we need to vamp up our strategy. That doesn't mean being strong and draconian in our security measures, but it does mean challenging it smartly and really throwing resources behind whichever strategy we choose to tackle this form of extremism. Now, I understand.
Remind our viewers, Jonathan. Remind our viewers,
campaigning
Jonathan,
for 48 hours or so. But really, when this campaign gets up and running again, I want to know what more they're going to do to tackle extremism and its root causes.
Remind our viewers what Prevent is.
Prevent is one preventative pillar of the UK government's contest counter-terrorism strategy. It's all about engaging different sectors of society to, at an upstream way, prevent escalation to radicalisation, to try and take vulnerable people and stop them going down these pathways towards violence. It is roundly criticised and probably unfairly so for the most part. But it's clear that more work has to be done on it. It's not quite as effective as it should be, despite probably being a gold standard in Europe. And so I'd like to see a lot more engagement with the difficult questions about how we engage teachers and how we give them the resources so that, you know, if young people are vulnerable to radicalisation, they are prevented and an intervention is engaged. But equally, you know, can we come up with a strategy to really undermine extremist propaganda, which at the moment is only done in a really piecemeal way from the British government?
Simon Scofield, you agree?
Absolutely. I think we need to be making a very positive case for our values, and I think we need to be replacing or at least offering an alternative set of values to those put forward by these extremist groups. I think this is a battle of ideas, and I think you can throw all the bombs and all the bullets and all the money that you like at this. Ultimately, if we can't prove that liberal democracy will make you happier and will allow you to live your life better and more freely than those who, who believe that radical theocracy is the way forward and that murdering 8-year-old children at concerts is the way forward, then you don't win. That's the only way.
Trauma like this doesn't go away in a day or two, said Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. He expressed solidarity with the victims' families and in particular those who've lost children.
We have to give them all the support we possibly can and also make sure we live in a safe environment in the future. And we live in safety together. But we do not allow our communities to be divided by this kind of appalling, atrocious act of violence.
Simon Scofield, is the leader of the opposition there striking the right tone?
I find it very difficult to be supportive of that. I think he's striking the right tone, but I think his actions speak louder than his words. If you look at his senior advisors, you see people who sing karaoke with convicted IRA terrorists. And I think it's one thing to say, yes, violence is bad, and I think we can all agree that. But if you're then rewarding people by employing your terrorists onto your staff, I think that strikes a very different note, and I think actions need to speak louder than words.
You agree with that, Jonathan Russell?
I think it's very tricky for politicians in the aftermath of an attack. There is always a sense that platitudes and candlelit vigils is the thing to do. But I do agree that that's only believable if we follow it up with a proper strategy afterwards. And Corbyn's Labour Party has been very light on that. I don't buy his commitment to really tackling this ideology and preserving the innocence of these children as he said. And we know that this trauma does lead to fear. This fear does lead to hate. And the hate can lead to reciprocal forms of radicalisation and extremism, and that's to be avoided. So
how do you do that? How do you nip the hate?
As may be the case.
How do you nip the hate in the bud?
It's by occupying that space. At the moment, there seems to be a vacuum that is ceded to those who explain either this as the problem of everything to do with Islam, or people who say this is nothing to do with Islam. I think both are rubbish, and we've got to be able to have a vocabulary to talk about this. This is Islamist extremism. It has something to do with Islam, and that means we need to engage those within Muslim communities who are willing to do something about it, and we need to empower them to do so. And we need to understand that there are other sectors of society who can play a big role as well, and we cannot be afraid of having these difficult conversations and coming up with a proactive, difficult strategy, because it is tricky. But, in the next 5 years, in the next government, we need to be getting on with that.
All right. We've heard a lot the word terrorism over the last few days. On the same first foreign tour where the U.S. president was in Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump there, part of the inauguration of a global center for combating extremist ideology. He again talked about terrorism during a speech given before leaving Israel this Tuesday for Rome.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. They would think that's a great name. I will call them from now on losers, because that's what they are. They're losers.
Max Abrams, has Trump got it right this time?
It's always dangerous to agree with anything about Trump. Then people will say you're a Trump lover, etc. But on this point, I think he nails it exactly right. Trump calls a lot of people losers, undeservedly, but Islamic State and terrorists like it are indeed losers. My research shows, and I have tons of it on this topic, that when groups act like Islamic State does, they lose politically. Specifically, when groups use indiscriminate violence, when they attack, children and women, this is a surefire recipe for the group not to achieve its core stated political goals. And furthermore, when groups claim credit for very unpopular attacks, my research also shows attacks, for example, against, young girls, that also tends to be very counterproductive. And so these are just two areas where Islamic State is indeed acting like a loser, and that's why it will continue to be a political loser.
Max Abrams, Donald Trump, when he was in Saudi Arabia, when he was in Israel, was singling out one nation state as being responsible for terrorism, Iran. How does that sound when we see what's going on in Manchester?
I mean, it sounds ridiculous. If you go to Washington, D.C., and you ask people, from the think tank community, which is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, they will all just sort of nod their head in agreement and identify Iran. But that list of state sponsors of terrorism is methodologically, not at an undergraduate level. It's not a defensible list. Furthermore, I think it's silly to talk about who's the world's biggest state sponsor of terrorism. Why should the State Department come out with a list like that? The question that the State Department should come out with a list about is which countries most support the terrorist groups in the world that pose the biggest direct threat to Americans. And so if that list were reframed in a logical way, in a manner that most Americans would agree with, Iran would not be at the top of the list. Countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, I would argue Turkey would be at the very top of the list for their support of Salafist, rebel groups, as well as at times for Islamic State elements. And so it does chafe me when American politicians reflexively point to Iran as the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, when Iran does not fund the kinds of terrorists who pose the biggest threats to the American homeland. I'm talking about Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, and their other Salafist friends.
Let's go to Manchester now, and France 24's Mark Owen, who joins us from there. Mark, we have two stories out of Manchester at this hour. On the one hand, the vigil that's taking place for Monday night's victims, and on the other, the investigation. What's the mood?
People here, frankly, in Manchester, Francois, are showing a mood of utter defiance. I'll just point out over there, I don't know whether you can see, I just put, excuse me, sir, could you step out of the way? Thank you. I don't know if you can see, love for all, hatred for none. And that's a message from the Muslim Association here in Manchester. A clear message. They're saying that, okay, the man who carried out this atrocity says that he was part of the Islamic State group, who's been claimed by them. But very much echoing what Donald Trump was saying, they're the losers. And that's very much the feeling here in Manchester. There was a series of speeches that were given during the 25-minute long vigil which took place on the platform behind us there at the entrance to the town hall. I'll pull this other big man out of the way, please. Sorry, sir, if you can that one. Cool. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. That's very much the spirit here in Manchester. Everybody's really cooperating and being very friendly. Thank you very much, sir. Everything took place over there, and of course there were all the main political figures. Amber Rudd was here representing the Conservative Party, Jeremy Corbyn representing Labour, Tim Fallon for the Liberal Democrats, but none spoke, obviously, in the spirit that the campaign's been put on hold and no one's seeking to take any advantage, and sort of keeping that kind of, I think, very decent distance from what's been going on. But there were great speeches from Mancunians, people who live and breathe the city of Manchester and its spirit. And most of all was the poet, Tony Walsh, kind of like the poet laureate of Manchester, I suppose. And he delivered I'm sure it will be on one of the social websites very, very soon, the actual whole length of the poem that he delivered, which was absolutely fantastic, which in the end, he ended with the words, choose love, which I think was a great thing to end with, given what people have seen, given what people are going to live with the memory of this atrocity that's been committed by one man, whose name I'm not going to give. I know it, but why give him the publicity? And the people here very much thinking, well, you know, this has happened. We're going to rebuild. We're going to make this place better than before. And we're going to show by being welcoming and by being loving and being open with people and enjoying life that Manchester is about more than being the victims of what happened last night.
You know, Mark, earlier Jonathan Russell was saying how the problem when you have an attack like this one is that you have those who say it's got nothing to do with Islam, those that say it's got everything to do with Islam. From what you're saying, from what you're hearing, Mancunians taking a measure of what's going on?
Mancunians would, I think, stand up. 10,000 people here. I'm sure if I shouted out your question, they would all bawl back, no, it's got nothing to do with faith. It's about abusing faith. And I think the people that we're seeing over there, the Muslim community, love for all, hatred for none, their message very, very clearly is reflected by everybody here. And long may that last, I think everyone would say here. You know, I think people recognise. And on the platform, there were Muslims, there were Sikhs, there were Jews, there were Christians, there were almost every faith that is present here in Manchester, in great numbers, I might add. And they were all standing together behind that message about pulling together, being together, building something together to make the city great and to get over this atrocity, which clearly is appalling, which clearly will live in people's memories for many generations. 22 people killed, most of them children, which is incredibly difficult for anybody to stomach, but it's really horrific when you think of the circumstances. Kids going to their first concert, perhaps, then being killed in such an horrific way. It's awful. And let's not forget there are those who are still injured. Many of them are life-changing injuries. Some of them visited in hospital there by Theresa May, who was up in Manchester as well, showing her support for those who were victims of this attack. Manchester's message will be that Manchester continues and that it gets bigger. And the idea of this being something to do with Islam, I think, is something that most people, not all people, because some clearly will have a different view, but I think most people, and certainly those gathered here, the 10,000 here, would say, no, nothing to do with Islam at all.
Jonathan Russell, your reaction listening to Marco, and is that message out of that square in Manchester going to resonate throughout Britain?
Well, look, I do appreciate Muslim community groups coming forward at times like this and showing that Islam can be about love as much as hate. And actually, you know, at this time, that's exactly what's required. And, you know, I think that's the work, the interfaith work and the sort of community work and community cohesion work that is ongoing, led by some of these Muslim groups, is exactly the sort of soft prevention work that we need more of. I would only say that, as well as that, we need to ask tricky questions about the exact relationship between Islamist extremism and the faith that they exploit, and that's only why I say we can't say it has nothing to do with this faith, because there are verses that are exploited, and you know, I absolutely agree that why would you choose a violent verse to express yourself rather than a peaceful verse? Why would you choose hate over love? But we need to be honest and confront those difficult bits to make it safe for our Muslim communities here in Britain, who, you know, without having that conversation are often blamed unfairly for something that they have no direct relationship to.
Simon Scofield, just a quick word on this, because here in France, after the Paris attacks, the Nice attack, we're still having trouble having the conversation that Jonathan Russell is describing. It sounds like Britain is moving forward on this.
Absolutely, and you know, the Quilliam Foundation, of which Jonathan Russell represents, do great work in this area. I think it's really important, though, to make it clear that, you know, that it has to have something to do with Islam, because in saying it has nothing to do with Islam, we completely cut off at the knees the people who are trying really hard to reform the religion. You look at people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who has written a fantastic book, which I recommend, called Heretic, which outlines why Islam needs a reformation. You know, Christianity had a reformation, and we don't do crusades anymore. And whilst the overwhelming majority of the Muslims in Britain and in Europe live peaceful lives, people are twisting their faith, and we need to help those Muslims retake control of their faith.
Simon Scofield, I want to thank you for joining us from Bristol. I want to thank Jonathan Russell in London. as well as Max Abrams for being with us from Boston. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next here on France 24. And for more, we're joined by Emma James.
Hi there.
We just heard France 24's Mark Owen, who is attending that vigil, that multi-faith vigil that just took place in Manchester.
Yes, and really Manchester and the rest of the world in shock today. None more so really than the performer who was on stage last night when this atrocity took place. Ariana Grande tweeted, "Broken from the bottom of my heart. I am so sorry. I don't have words." Now, it's been reported that she is going to cancel the rest of her world tour. I don't know that that's actually been confirmed as of yet, but she was due to play in London on Thursday night. That's now looking very unlikely indeed.
And of course, when this happened, you got to feel for her, because the Eagles of Death Metal, who were on stage the night in the Bataclan in Paris, and it's something that's going to mark them for the rest of their careers.
Absolutely. I can only imagine the kind of feeling that she would have the next time that she has to walk out on stage, knowing that at least 22 of her fans, people who paid money to buy tickets to come and see her, lost their lives at the end of her concert. It is a terrible, terrible burden to bear. But as for the city of Manchester itself, certainly a lot of people talking about the Mancunian spirit and the fact that this will help carry them through. There was an article written in The Independent very soon after the attacks were announced, where little was known about the actual details of the attack, but it really sums up a lot of the feelings in the United Kingdom, saying that this really isn't about the Dunkirk spirit or a stiff upper lip. It's actually that people simply aren't equipped to do anything other than do their best to carry on. And that's the kind of message that we've seen a lot from people in Manchester in particular. Tweets like this one: "You've got the wrong city if you think hate will tear us apart." This Twitter user saying, "Look at my city, beauty amongst ugliness, solid arms, wide open." And this Twitter user talking about a conductor on a train as it pulled into Manchester saying, "People make Manchester. We will not be beaten by terrorism." And this journalist posted a note she received from a young girl in Manchester, saying that we in this city have not reacted to this terror attack with vitriol or with fear. She says, "If you do choose to write about us, please know that we reacted with kindness, empathy and love, not hate." Now, of course, James Corden is a very well-known figure in the United States now, a comedian who started out as an actor and comedian in the United Kingdom. He had a message about Manchester for the people of Manchester, but for the rest of the world as well, who maybe don't know that much about it. Take a listen.
Many of you won't have ever been to Manchester, but you will definitely have heard of it. It's a place full of comedy and curries and character. But when I think of Manchester, the place that I know, I think of the spirit of the people there. And I'm telling you, a more tight-knit group of people you will be hard-pressed to find. Strong, proud, caring people with community at its core. And if it was even possible, the spirit of the people of Manchester will grow even stronger this evening. My thoughts and prayers are with everyone in Manchester tonight. We'll all go to bed holding our little ones even tighter this evening.
Yeah, you'll need a lot of strength when you look at the list of victims.
Yes, absolutely. The names have only just started to emerge, but it really is as we feared. The victims, many of them are young, and the young girls. The youngest we know now is an 8-year-old, Safi Rose Roussos, from Leyland in Lancashire. She has been confirmed among the dead. Her family were injured in the blast too. The first person that we knew the name of was Georgina Calendar, an 18-year-old girl, and here she is photographed with Ariana Grande 2 years ago. A huge fan of the singer, and what a lot of people have been looking at today and have found really quite distressing and disturbing is this message that she posted back in the summer to Ariana Grande saying, "I miss you so much, can't wait to see you on the Dangerous Woman tour, it's gonna kill me." Now, that phrase is one that she actually used quite a lot. It's littered throughout her Twitter account, and it's just so awful that it came to literally be the fact. Now, lots of her friends have been posting messages on social media to my beautiful best friend. I hope you rest in peace, my darling. I love you so much and will always